Good evening, all, and thank you for such a lovely introduction. I do a lot of different speaking engagements, and to be honest with you, I usually follow people who aren't particularly great speakers, but following Turhan is a bit of a hard act to follow. Pretty impressive, wouldn't you say? For those of you who've heard me speak before, you know that I try to use a little bit of humor in my presentations as a rule of thumb, even though sometimes the subject matter is a little bit difficult. I can assure you that Bayan proofed everything before I was to speak, and she took all of the fun slides out of the presentation. No kidding, she actually emailed me and said, I'm taking this out, and this out, and this out, and this out, because they're too funny, and I want you to be more serious. She asked me to speak what a community can do to respond to crisis, because I think it's the only way that we can handle a crisis like we're faced with at the moment. Refugee issues in general, Syria more specifically, because that's been the crisis that I've been involved with and given most of my life to in the last 6 years. We can only solve this as a community. This is a picture I took a long time ago in my former workplace. It's a community response to a medical crisis, a community response that you see fairly regularly in newspapers. There's a helicopter flying in to pluck some injured sick person off and rush them off to a big fancy elaborate hospital for the best medical care on earth, which I really believe we provide here in Canada by and large. But I can assure you that you don't see this type of community medical response to mental health. For some reason, mental health and mental well-being is at the very bottom of the list in Canada, even though it's a very bona fide, medically validated medical condition. In fact, I was inquiring for a colleague just this last week, trying to get them in to see a psychiatrist friend of mine, and I was told that they're taking referrals as we speak in the Toronto area. They're taking referrals that were sent to them over a calendar year ago. That's how slow the response is to mental health and well-being in Canada, and I don't think it's dissimilar in other countries. Some of my colleagues from the Harvard program are actually here tonight. I'd encourage you to mingle and talk with them and pick their brains, because they are the very finest minds in the world with respect to mental health, and I'm sure they'll also say that that's the case in many other countries. So refugees have been coming to North America for a very long time. This is a very famous painting. I do not remember the name of it. I took it in the Louvre some time ago, maybe 2 years ago, and it spoke to me. It spoke to me that people have been fleeing countries, they've been fleeing persecution, they've been coming to this continent and other continents really for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But what we're facing at the moment is probably the worst crisis since the Second World War. Mental health is not a Canadian perspective, it's not an American perspective, it's not a European perspective. Mental health issues affect people all over the world, even people who are currently living in kind of normal conditions. You know, you have your perfect lifestyle in Mississauga, Ontario, you have a wonderful family, you have a wonderful job. There's still quite a high level of mental unwellness, if that's even a word, in the society. But as Dr. Turhan spoke, when you're dealing with this type of war crisis, it's exemplified by a factor of, you know, often 10 or 15. I don't think we know the number right at the moment. From what I've seen on the ground in Syria and Turkey and other places, personally, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I think 100% of them are affected with mental trauma right now. I don't have statistics to back that up, but that's something our group's going to start looking at very diligently. Turhan spoke at length about having a purpose, and I'll tell you one of the similarities that I see from the ground in Syria to the ground in Canada and to the ground in some of the refugee camps is hopelessness, is loss of purpose. Simply put, often people don't have anything to do. They don't have anything to look forward to. They don't have a purpose in their day. Imagine the children right now in many of the refugee camps, even in some of the modern developed countries that have taken them in. They can't go to school, they can't pursue their education, they can't pursue a career. And this young lad here in the picture, one of the guards gave him a fairly decent beating, actually, for trying to steal some money from me. He wasn't trying to steal very much money, he was trying to steal a couple dollars. And I befriended this kid and really found out that the kids were just bored to death. in this camp, days and days and days on end with nothing productive to do. That I see a similarity here in Canada. A lot of the people who've come here don't have a lot of hope. They're so far behind on getting English as a second language training, which is really the precursor to getting them jobs or into programs, and not being able to get the English as a second language is such a stumbling block and really is correlated with loss of hope and making them bored and non-productive. The other thing in Canada that we see at the moment is, again, a really slow integration into mental health care. So these are two areas that this organization is taking on and is trying to tackle and is trying to resolve, rather than waiting for government to get it right or get it done faster. So I think this is an organization that I can certainly throw my support behind, even though we probably will never agree on everything. No collaboration agrees on everything, but this kind of collaboration is required to deal with the crisis that's going on right now. Next one, please. Anyone know what this is? Anyone in the crowd recognize this place? Yeah, you, because I took you there. Anyone else? Sir, what is it? Yeah, in Peterborough. So I was sitting down with some friends not that long ago, and one of my buddies who was flipping through the internet said some redneck idiot just firebombed the mosque in Peterborough, Ontario. To which I said, oh man, that's my hometown. Why did some redneck idiot firebomb the mosque in Peterborough? But I also knew that Peterborough is a pretty amazing community. I think one of the best communities in this country. And I can tell you, after some redneck idiot firebombed the mosque in Peterborough, the Jewish community, the Catholic community, the Protestant community, the general community raised so much money for this mosque that they rebuilt it in a record time. Not only that, our Muslim brothers and sisters who were relying on that mosque for prayers, for the first time in history, I think, this made international news. The local synagogue opened up space for them to pray in. And that community is amazing. They had that community's worked together through a festival called the Ibrahim Festival for over 30 years, where on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, people from all different kinds of faiths get together and they collaborate and they work on projects together and they have a real sense of community. And this is what we need to do in our community to tackle mental health and to tackle, at the moment, the English language training problem that is in front of so many refugees. And I just want to point out that, don't kid yourselves, these communities don't get along in every respect. They bicker and they argue, just like any other community does, but they come together and they work together for a common cause. And that's what we need to do with this crisis that's before us as well. And this is one of the first kind of civilian-led grassroots organizations that is really tackling these important issues in the GTA. So I'm really proud to see so many people here trying to support them tonight. You know, we just have to keep working away at problems. This Syrian crisis in particular has broken me on many days. I have almost quit 100 times, but I keep going back to my hunting camp up north of Peterborough, and there's a beaver up there that has been chewing away at this tree for about 7 years now. And I don't know what it's going to do when it knocks this tree down, because the tree's about 150 feet tall, and the swamp's not big enough for it to float in when it falls. And honestly, this has got to be the most retarded beaver on the face of the earth. But it doesn't quit. It doesn't give up. It just doesn't stop. Imagine what this beaver could do if it roped in a couple friends to help it. But beavers are stubborn. They're a little stubborn. They don't like strangers. They like to work by themselves. But they really need to rope in some help. Malaz Sabai is out here in the crowd somewhere. Can you just stand up so everyone can see you? Stand up there, buddy. Bayan, stand up for a minute if you would. Bayan Hafid. So I didn't know these two wonderful people 6 years ago, but we have almost nothing in common. You guys can sit down. Everyone's seen you. We didn't have a lot in common, but we've now worked together on 3 different continents for the better part of 5 or 6 years now. In fact, I remember the night that Malaz and I sat down and interviewed Bayan, gave her a pretty hard time for one of her jobs. None of us are rich. The three of us may be actually the three poorest people in the room, possibly. But between the three of us, if I can just be proud for 1 second, between the three of us, we've affected probably over 1 million lives. If everyone in this room could join hands and work together, we could solve this problem here in Toronto, because most of you are smarter than the three of us. At least I know all my friends here from Harvard are significantly smarter than me, probably most of you too. But if three people like us can do these sort of things, a crowded room full of people like this could do something really amazing. And I think you're on the right track tonight. I'll let you know when the tree falls. You know, who we're working for, I think sometimes it's mindful to remember who you're working for. You know, people have normal problems who are dealing with these crises in other countries. This lady, the mother of this baby, actually had cancer. And, you know, people in these countries, in Syria particularly, are suffering from normal medical problems as well, above and beyond guns and bullets and all those other things. And they want what anyone else wants. They want a good community. They want good health care. They want their children to get better and to grow older, like anyone else. And they're trying to come to places like Canada and the United States and other countries just to seek safety and hope and future for their children. So again, this is an organization that's giving these people some hope. And that's a pretty special thing. So who are the community stakeholders? Obviously, a community stakeholder is a person or a group of people who share an interest. The definition in the book was for business, but this is for humanity. I think we should have an even closer community bond. Who are the stakeholders in this room? I see, for the first time, maybe in a long time, I see a fairly diverse group here in Toronto. And that's good, because we need to diversify. We can't fix these problems with a room full of entirely Syrian, Muslim predominantly crowds of people. We have to diversify. We have to encourage other community stakeholders to join in. And that's a personal responsibility, everyone in this room. You need to be inviting your neighbors and your friends and your colleagues and your work colleagues and your social colleagues out to join some of these causes, because this is no longer what Malaz, Bayan, and I have been dealing with. This is no longer a Syrian problem. This is a worldwide problem at the moment. This is affecting the entire globe, financially, educationally, from a healthcare perspective, and so forth. More importantly than who's in the room here right now, who is not in the room here right now? Who isn't here that should be in this room right now? We need to reach out to those crowds. And I'm pretty sad to say we had some stakeholders, or I invited some stakeholders that I was thrilled were going to attend tonight, and they backed out at the very last minute. And I won't get into who they were, but I was very saddened that some community stakeholders who should be in this room chose not to be tonight. But like the beaver, I'm going to just keep working away at that as long as it takes. Priorities: education, healthcare, mental well-being, understanding that mental health particularly is a priority, and collaboration. Those are the important things that we need to be thinking about tonight. Specifically mental health well-being at the moment. A lot of these refugees who are coming to Canada are severely traumatized beyond imagination, actually. You know, Bayan, Malaz, and I, and a bunch of others dealt with a lot of the Syrian refugees that came through the Toronto different area hotels, particularly the Toronto Plaza Hotel. And some of the stories that they came here with sent seasoned nurses and doctors away in tears. You know, actually quite beyond anything that can be explained. So they're going to need a lot of help. Very quickly, Diane also made me promise to be less than 15 minutes. Or what was it, 10? I forget. What I've learned working in a war zone. The only way to get anything done is to work with other people. It doesn't even matter if you don't like those other people. I work with a lot of people I don't like. I would never have them over to my house for dinner. I'd never introduce them to my friends and family. But you have to work with these people to get things done. So get that through your head in here tonight, right now, that to solve this problem, we all have to work with people that sometimes we would rather not work with to get this job done. It's the only way. Governments cannot be counted on to carry this burden. The only people who can be counted on to carry this burden reliably over the long term are civilian individuals. The governments will chip in and help when they can, but governments come and go. Look at the government change south of the border right now. We've had significant changes in government as well. Those things ebb and flow, but we have to count on each other in this community to get things done. Most governments also don't have a clue what's going on at ground level. Not a clue what's going on at ground level. I did a presentation not that long ago to politicians, gave them one of my cool green laser pointers in the crowd and asked them to show me where Syria was on the map. The majority of them in the crowd couldn't even show me where it was. These are educated people. So the only people we can count on is our own communities for sure. And really, a community-based model is something I learned as a relatively young man when I was policing. I know, hard to believe that someone in as good a shape as me was ever a cop. But when I was a young man, when I was in my 20s, I was in the police force, and we put a lot of time and effort and energy into community-based models. And I'll never forget this one lady complaining to me that the cops never drive through her neighborhood. So we assured her that we did. And she said, well, every time you drive through my neighborhood, then why don't you knock on my door and prove that you drive through my neighborhood, because we don't believe that you do. So for the next 7 night shifts at 2 in the morning, I stopped in her laneway and I knocked on her door and let her know that I was in the neighborhood, right? But the point being though, we were trying to impart on this lady that if you don't phone us, if you don't tell us what the problems are, if you don't collaborate with us, how are we ever going to solve the problems in a community to the extent that a policeman could, which is very small, by the way. My point is that communities need to work together. You need to pick the phone up and talk to each other. You need to collaborate with each other. And this is a pretty amazing event tonight. And I'm pretty warm inside my heart seeing this kind of crowd. Seeing this kind of crowd want to listen to the mental health experts, and please talk with them more tonight during breaks, because they are the experts that know what to do with respect to mental health. I'm not. I actually have almost zero training in mental health. My background is not in mental health. And, in terms of a community response, again, who's missing from this kind of response? As a first responder, I see thousands of responders that you may not even think about. The road crew guy here that's going to clean up after everybody's gone. The helicopter's the one that gets all the pictures, but they really only take care of the patient in the last 6 or 8 minutes. There's police, there's firefighters. I'm glad to say we have some firemen in the crowd tonight, or firewoman in the crowd tonight. So thanks. The firefighters are another part of your community. The police are part of your community. The government people are part of your community. The school teachers are part of your community. There's a huge community here. You have to engage everybody in this battle. And Malaz, I told you I took one thing away from you. Malaz was giving a talk not long ago that I was listening to, and he said, never believe that a few caring people can't change the world, for indeed, that's who all who really ever have changed things. From Margaret Mead, and I think that quote kind of sums up everything. So, thanks for being here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for supporting Diane and Khaled and their team. And particularly thank you to the scholars and academics from my cohort group at Harvard. Thank you guys for coming.